So good morning, everyone, and welcome to our February volunteer engagement webinar series. Really excited this morning to have Keita Cole with us, who is the Senior Volunteer Transportation Network Program Coordinator. She's going to be talking to us about volunteer recruiting and finding the right fit. This series has been a lot of me talking at you guys. So for the next few months, we're going to have some different perspectives and people talking about different topics. So I'm really excited that Keita has agreed to do this for us. I want to remind you all that this is being recorded, so we are going to start muting people just to reduce that background noise. So submit your questions in the chat box. Anything that we discuss on the webinars are best practices and are not going to be required for you to implement. So if you like any of the ideas that Keita is going to present, be sure you work with your upper management and make sure that it's something that you have the support to implement. And with that, Keita, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Sydney. First, I want to start by saying that I am not an expert on volunteer recruiting or volunteer management at all. This is just coming from research that I've done and have worked on with my program, and through my research and presenting this, I've actually found some best practices that I'm going to start implementing, so it's actually worked in my favor as well. So hopefully you'll find something through what I'm going to talk about today, and you'll be able to adapt it to your programs. I muted myself. There we go. So first we're going to start with recruiting and screening volunteers. So this first photo, if someone could just volunteer, that'd be great. I'm sure that's where the majority of us are. I know that's where I am with my program. We just need volunteers, especially with COVID. We just want somebody to show up. We just want somebody to do something. We just need people. And hopefully by the end of this presentation and by the end of the other people that are going to present throughout this year, this is where we'll be. So there's going to be volunteers. We're going to see volunteers everywhere. We're going to know how to find those volunteers everywhere. So where we want to be. So the first picture is where we all are probably, and the second picture is where we all want to be. And how we get there is what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to get there through assessing the potential of our program. You can't just jump into it. You've got to first look at where your program is and what's going on in your program. So before you start recruiting new people, you've got to take a step back and assess if your program is really ready to handle more volunteers. When you ask most people who manage a volunteer program what makes a volunteer program successful, more than likely they're going to give you numbers. They're going to either recite how many volunteers they have, how many hours their volunteers have done, what the growth of that volunteers have been, and numbers only tell a small part of that story. Most of the time it can be misleading. It's less about the number of volunteers and more about the impact that those volunteers have. You can have 15 volunteers and only 5 of them are really doing anything. So while it looks good to say you've got 15 volunteers, it would be better if all 15 of those were as impactful as the 5 that you have that are doing something. So quality wins over quantity every time. So it's, like I said, it's less about the number and more about that impact. So 4 steps to assess your volunteer program. And these are the 4, we're going to go over these 4 steps, but I'm just going to bring them up first. And then we're going to break them down step by step. So 1 is to determine the current level of your volunteer involvement. 2 is to determine your potential for increasing your volunteer involvement. Number 3 is identifying what your program needs improvement on. And number 4 is create, adopt, develop an action plan and a timeline. So we've got to take these steps first to assess our program before we can even get to finding our right volunteer. Understanding where your program came from and where you've recruited your most valued volunteers and those 5 impactful volunteers is going to help you determine where you need to go and how you need to go forward. So let's start with step 1. Determine the current level of your involvement. So first, you need to clean up your volunteer database. Most people think that their database is an accurate representation of the volunteers that they generally have working. And while this is probably true, most people have either use it in Excel or they have a program. I know with my software program that we use, we put all of our volunteers in there, and so we can like run a list of our active and inactive volunteers, and so we consider that, okay, this is the volunteers we have. But is that really an accurate accounting of our volunteers? Know who you have and what they do. Most of those, and I know for my program, we do not have all of our volunteers listed. Most of those listed in there are the very highly active ones. Some of those are ones that have never moved beyond the orientation stage. So they've never done anything. Yeah, they signed up to be a volunteer, but they've never actually done anything. Include your non-traditional volunteers. So, do we put the names of our board members in there? Do we put the names of our steering committee members in there? They're volunteering to be on your board. They're volunteering to be on your steering committee. They might not be volunteering to do a task within your organization, but they are considered a volunteer. Do you have their contact information in there? That's going to come in handy down the road, and we'll get to that later. But maybe you need to make sure you include those non-traditional volunteers as well. What about people that help with special projects or special events? Maybe they're just a one-time volunteer that just chip in for a special project. Maybe it's somebody in your office. Maybe it's, somebody in the community that just helps at a one-time event. They're still a volunteer for your program. So you've got to look at everybody that's involved with your organization and make sure that you have everybody listed. What about those that provide professional or in-kind services? Maybe it's a business person that donates some kind of door prize, or they donate some kind of service to your volunteers, or time to help, or anything. Maybe they help manage your social media content. That's a volunteer. Again, you're not paying them to do it, they're offering to do it. So you got to make sure that you include them in your database. And it may be that you can't use the current database you have. Maybe you have to start an Excel database. Maybe you need to revamp it. Maybe you need to start fresh. Maybe you need to take your volunteers that you currently have in your database that you're already using and put them into an Excel database so you can freshen them up. But those people that are not active right now, don't delete them just yet, because you may need them down the road somewhere. All right, let's go on to step 2. Determine your potential for increasing your volunteer involvement. So that's a lot of words for like, well, what does that mean? Adding more volunteers isn't always the answer.
Yes, thank you.
If you're not equipped to manage them, they just become part of the problem. If you cannot manage them, if you cannot give them sufficient work to do, then just putting more people in the mix is not going to solve it. If you have a combination of staff and volunteers, you need to make sure that everybody is on board with your volunteers. If they're not managed well and they have a negative experience, instead of being a spokesperson for your program, they become a deterrent for it. Volunteers may be free, but volunteer programs are not. And before you add more, you need to make sure you can support them. Sometimes if there is a mixture of staff and volunteers, staff can create self-fulfilling scenarios and about how unreliable volunteers can be. So they may say, well, that volunteer didn't do what they were supposed to do. And so, they talk and things happen, and it can create a negative atmosphere for your volunteers, and it'll make them miserable and they won't want to participate. So maybe you need to do a survey. And in this book that I used for research, it's called A Perceived Value of Volunteer Assessment. And I am going to when I send this slideshow, and I'm going to send this volunteer assessment to Sydney for her to send out to everybody. It's a Word document, so you can adapt it how you need to. But it's just a simple 5 questions, circle, 1 through 5. Where do you feel like volunteers fall within our organization? I mean, you can do it anonymously. Survey your staff. How do they perceive your volunteers? Do they think they're really good? Do they think they're pointless? Do they think they have enough to do? Because once you determine how your staff feels about your volunteers, it's going to determine what kind of environment they're walking into. And if you don't have staff, maybe you need to look at your other volunteers and think, okay, well, do the other volunteers feel like there's enough work to bring on more? Or maybe we just need to have a meeting about doing more things. So it just depends on what your level of volunteers are doing and what you need done. So just adding more people may not always be the right match. Sydney, are there any questions at this point?
I don't see any questions that have come in, but I'm very impressed that you got the first, amen, absolutely, thank you, that we've ever had in a webinar before. So keep up the great work.
All right, good. Okay, so step 3, identify what improvements your program needs. So what needs an upgrade? This is simple. Make sure that you have everything in place to make your volunteers successful. This is just evaluate your program and see if something needs improvement. It may be something simple like an updated volunteer description, which we're going to talk about that. So just hold on. I'm very excited about my presentation. Maybe you need to ask questions of your participating volunteers. Sometimes they can tell you what's missing. Maybe it's something simple like we just need a better resource for this, or we need, with my program, our volunteers, they drive people to doctor's appointments. Maybe you need to, they have to give them a phone number to call and say, I'm done with my appointment. So maybe we've heard from our volunteers, they need some type of card that they can write their number on to hand to the client when they drop them off at the doctor's appointment, that they can, easily access, that the person knows, okay, this is a volunteer driver. This is their cell phone number. This is who my driver is today. So even if they're at the doctor's appointment, they can give it to the nurse and say, hey, can you call this person? I'm ready to be picked up. So, we heard that was some feedback we got. I hadn't thought about that because I'm just like, well, I'll be there. They'll know. So maybe it's just simple like that you need to talk to your other volunteers about. So just what does your program need? And maybe you need to get your staff on board with their volunteers and have a pro-volunteer culture. And if you get your volunteers on board and get your staff on board, then when changes are made, then your volunteers are going to feel invested and they're going to feel important and they're going to want to do more because they're going to feel like they've had a hand in making the program successful. Any questions on that? I saw something pop up on the screen.
We did have one question come in that asked, what's the name of the book that you used in your research?
It is called, and it was sourced at the bottom of one page. It's The Complete Idiot's Guide to Recruiting and Managing Volunteers. I got it off Amazon.
Great. I'll include that in the chat box as well.
Okay.
And that was all we had.
Okay, perfect. It's a really good book. A lot of this information came from that book, and I only got like halfway through it, but it's really good. I've highlighted pretty much the first half of the book. So now that you've taken steps 1 through 3, now you need to put your ideas into action. So you need to create, adopt, and develop an action plan and a timeline. So now you got to implement what changes you have found that needs to be done. Don't get overwhelmed. Just follow through and communicate what you have found out through your surveys with your staff, through your surveys with your volunteers, through talking with your board members. If you did that, whatever you did, you need to communicate that now to whoever's involved. Is it your direct manager? Is it your other volunteers? Is it your volunteer coordinators, whatever needs to happen there. You need to communicate, okay, this is what I found, this is what works, this is what doesn't work, this is what we need to fix. So your action plan needs to include the who, why, what, how, and when. So who was involved in the assessment? So who did you interview? Why was it done? What were the results? How will changes be made? When will they be completed? And the most important thing is to follow through and communicate. Share with your stakeholders and anybody involved in your timeline on how you want to get it finished. Again, some of it could be simple, like it can be done immediately. So you can be like, this was something that was suggested, we've already made that change. It's not like you got to have a big written out timeline. And it doesn't mean you've got to have some big drawn out report. It just really depends on how your board members and your stakeholders want to view it. It's however your program works, and it could just be something for yourself. It doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be some big adopted report that has to be turned into somebody specific. So those are the 4 steps for assessing your program. Any questions on those 4 steps before we move into recruiting the right volunteer?
Nothing has come into the chat box.
Perfect. And all of our programs can use an assessment on a regular basis. Mine as well. Like I said, going through this research for this presentation, I found a lot of stuff with my program that I need to revamp. So there's going to be a lot of changes coming up with my program in and of itself. So it can always be done. So now let's move on to recruiting the right volunteer. Now that you've assessed it, you can manage more volunteers. How do you find the right volunteer? Creating a great volunteer position description is the #1 goal in recruiting the right person. You want to attract the right person for the right position. So basically you're writing a job description. I'm a firm believer in things happen for a reason. You hear things, you read things, you see things, and they come around when you need them. Recently, I was on a trip to East Tennessee, and I was listening to an audiobook, and it was Matthew McConaughey's book, Greenlight. Highly recommend it, by the way. And while listening to it, he was talking about his acting career and how he took several months off from acting because he just wasn't getting the right roles for him. He wasn't finding the right fit. And when I started hearing him talk about that, I was thinking about this presentation. I really tuned into what he was saying. And he said something that was it just struck me. And I was like, that's exactly what we're trying to do as volunteer recruiters. And that's something so I had to go back and find it and get it in writing. So this is what he said. The arrow does not seek the target draws the arrow. So think about that. The arrow doesn't seek the target draws the arrow. We have to draw in these volunteers. We cannot wait for them to seek us out. Because if we do that, we're never going to get any volunteers. People always say, I need to volunteer, but they never do it. So we've got to create the atmosphere to draw these people in. And when he said that, I was just like, that works in so many different levels, not just with his acting, but also with our volunteer recruitment. So again, it's a great book. I highly recommend it. But that part just really stuck out to me. And so I had to pull over on the side of the road and type it in my phone really quick so I wouldn't forget it. But things happen when you need them to happen, and things come in your life when you need them to happen. And so I just thought that quote was very appropriate for this. So just keep that in mind. The arrow doesn't seek the target draws the arrow. So now, elements of a volunteer position description. If you take nothing else away from today, take this. This was like mind-blowing for me. It was as Oprah calls it, your aha moment when I was researching this. The best position description omits the word volunteer. So we're all sitting here thinking we're trying to recruit volunteers, so that's what we need to say, volunteers. People don't want to see that. They want something fun. They want something entertaining. Down at the bottom of the screen is my source for where I got this information. The best position description omits the word volunteer. So here's some examples that were in the book that I just thought were great. Dog socializer is somebody that gets dogs ready for adoption. So they play with dogs, they get them used to being around people, they get them cleaned up, they get them ready. So they're volunteering for the shelter, but they don't call them a dog volunteer, they call them a dog socializer. They're prepping dogs to get them ready to be adopted. A resource diva. This is somebody who solicits in-kind donations. So maybe it's somebody who's looking for somebody to manage social media. It's not a social media volunteer, they're a resource diva. So it just sounds more fun. It sounds more important. It sounds more exciting. A party animal. Somebody who plans parties. So it's not a volunteer party planner. It's their party animal. We're looking for party animals. And then you explain there. So just do something to make your program stand out. In doing this, instead of me using volunteer drivers, I've decided that I want to start using a new term for my drivers for my program with My Ride. So for My Ride West Tennessee, we're going to, instead of saying we're now seeking volunteer drivers, we're going to start saying we're looking for waymakers. They make a way for people to get to their appointment. They make a way for people to be social. They make a way for people to not be stuck at home. So instead of saying I'm looking for a volunteer driver, we're looking for waymakers. So this is the most important thing. If you get nothing else out of today, try to come up with some kind of cute, fun, different position description than a volunteer. I saw something pop up. It said that a lot of students don't want to be called volunteers. They want to be called something else. So Sydney, was there anything else that's coming in?
Resource Diva, they love that idea. I think this is definitely a great takeaway to remove the volunteer from the role descriptions. I haven't done it. I'm definitely going to do it. So yeah, this is awesome.
I mean, I haven't either. I've been saying the whole time, I need volunteer drivers. I need volunteer drivers. And when I read this, it was just, like I said, this was my Oprah aha moment. And so we're gonna start using waymakers in Southwest Tennessee for volunteer drivers. So Glenda, Angie, get ready. We're starting to use waymakers. Y'all just didn't know that yet. So other elements of a volunteer position description. You want to have a good position description. So you want to make sure that the volunteer knows right from the start what you expect of them. So you want to have the duties listed out, whether it be bullet points, paragraph form. Bullet points are probably easier to read. So you're kind of doing a resume type situation for what you want your waymaker, your resource diva, what you want them to do. So you want to list out their duties. You want to list who they're going to be reporting to. Are they going to be reporting to the resource diva coordinator? Are they going to be reporting to, a different person within the organization? They need to know exactly who they're going to be reporting to from the get-go. So there's no question. There's no, once they get started, there's no issue on where that goes. You want to give them the location and schedule. Is it going to be remote? Is it something they can do from home? For high school students, is it something they can do working around their school schedule? Is it something that they have to come to your location to do? Is it flexible? Is it a 8 to 4:30 situation that has to happen? Is it something that can work on their schedule and be flexible? You want to give them a time commitment. How much time are you asking them to commit? Is this a position that's ongoing? Is this a position you're only looking for to fill for the next 3 months? Is this as much time as they want to commit? And if that's the case, or is it as much time as they want to commit, figure out a fun way to say that. Don't just say as much time as you want to do. Come up with however you feel led to give, or whatever, some way to make it feel like it's their decision on how much time they're given, that you're not putting a time limit on it. Again, you want to give these resource divas and party animals and waymakers, you want to give them the authority, and you want to make them feel empowered to this is their position, this is what they are doing, and they have that empowerment to do it. What are the skills needed? Do they need computer skills? Do they need a smartphone? Do they need to have access to the internet? Do they need to be able to drive? Like, what exactly your skills are? Do they need to be able to lift 50 pounds? Are you needing them to go set up at trade shows or do different things like that? So you need to, again, tell them right from the beginning what you expect of them. Is there going to be any kind of training provided? Are you going to do in-house training? Is there computer training? Is there training expected yearly? Are they expected to keep up with training? Because that might take away, if somebody don't have the time commitment to do training every 3 months, that might keep them from doing it as well. So again, making sure they know these things up front is going to help you make sure you find the right person. And then what are the benefits? How, not benefits as in insurance or anything like that, because again, this is a volunteer position. But what are they going to get out of it? It's important that you let them know how this is going to benefit them. We don't need to know, they don't care how it's going to benefit us. They need to know what they are going to get out of it. Is it changing somebody's life? Is it helping feed somebody in the community? Is it expanding your organization into other areas that might not have whatever you offer? You know, what are the benefits of being a resource diva? What are the benefits of being a waymaker? How or what are they going to get out of it? Because if they don't know what they're going to get out of it, why are they going to put this much time into it? All of these things are really important, because giving them this information up front, while you may think, well, I don't want to tell them all this up front because then they're not going to want to volunteer. But if this keeps them from volunteering, then you know you've weeded out the wrong people. This is how you find the right people from the beginning. So you've got to make sure you have all your right people in place. So now you've got to decide, now you've got your product description for your Resource Divas. So how are you going to recruit them? So Sydney and I love this little meme. So is it me you're recruiting for? So who are we looking for? And how are we going to find them? Are we going to do the warm body method, which is what most of us probably do? I'm guilty of it. This is what I do. The warm body approach is you're recruiting for a large number of volunteers, and you just distribute flyers. You set up everywhere. You just ask anybody, I need a volunteer. I just want you. I don't care. I just need you. Come on. That's your warm body method. You hand out flyers. You set up at trade shows. You give out brochures. You do presentations. That's your warm body method. Nothing wrong with it. That's just one method you can use. There's also a targeted method. This is specifically targeted at the group you're trying to reach. And you're gaining the attention of that specific audience and addressing their questions and needs. So you got to figure out, how am I going to recruit? Now that I know the exact person that I want and I've weeded out the wrong people, now how am I going to get them? Am I going to do the warm body method? Or am I going to do a targeted method? Regardless of which one you choose, you need to make it short, simple, and direct. So you got to point out the benefits that the volunteer will receive, as well as the community. So not only do we have to tell the volunteer how they're going to benefit from this, how's the community going to benefit? What benefits will the volunteer or your resource diva be bringing to the community by what they're doing? Is it going to be building community morale? Is it going to be bringing people in the community together? How is this going to benefit everybody? Again, we know how it's going to benefit us. It's just going to help us tremendously. They don't care about that. They need to know what they're doing, how it's making a difference. So use your social network. And by this, I don't just mean social media. While you need to engage in your social media, you have a social network as well. And your social network looks a lot like this picture. Ask your friends, family, current volunteers, staff, everybody. This is where that updated database comes in. This is why I said don't delete those inactive people just yet. This is why you need to put all of those non-traditional volunteers. This is why you need to put those one-timer volunteers. This is where that comes into place. This is where you need to look to help recruit. If you are part of another, if your volunteer program falls within another business like mine does, ask if you can use some of their clients. Ask if you can use some of their resources to help recruit. Ask the people who've been affected by your organization, people that you've helped. Ask them if they know places where you can target to find your next Resource Diva or your next Waymaker. They're the ones that are benefiting. They might be willing to help. Don't not ask the families of the people you've helped the benefit of your program. Reach out to those family members. Again, for my program, we drive people to the doctor. We're there to fill in for those family members who can't take off work. So they understand the value of what we do. So let's reach out to their families and say, hey, we need more Waymakers to get more people to the doctor. Do you have a resource at your church that we can tap in where we can find some more Waymakers? Is there a person at your church that we can drop your name and say, hey, we've helped Miss Smith's mom get to the doctor, and this is what she has to say about our program. We would really like to share with your senior circle. Is there a way we can do that? Use those people that you've already helped to get your foot in the door. Figure out a way to get everybody involved. Make it a game. Make it with your new volunteer, or your current volunteers. Make it something fun and make it a challenge. Have the volunteer who brings in the most potential volunteers for the next month, they get a prize. Then reach out to the businesses in your community and have them donate something. Obviously, most of us are working on grants, so we can't spend money on gift cards. But have them donate something. Again, referring back to my program, we use a local oil change company, and they donated a percentage off of an oil change, or a percentage off of a set of tires if our volunteers go in and show their tag that says they're a volunteer driver. So go in and talk to your local. It's usually better if it's locally owned instead of a chain, but go talk to them and have them donate something. So get some of the pressure off yourself. Don't feel like you're the only one that has to be doing all the work. You've got your network. Use your network. But figure out a way to get everybody involved. But just keep in mind, nobody's going to have the same passion that you have. It's your baby. The program is more than likely your baby. I know with mine, it's my baby. And nobody's going to be as dedicated to it as I am. While there are dedicated people to it, it's mine. I mean, I wrote the stuff for it. I wrote the policies and procedures. So I feel like it's my baby. So don't get discouraged if you don't feel like they're putting in 110%. They probably are. They're putting in their 110%. They're just not doing your level of 110%. Just be their cheerleader. Be thankful that they're willing to step up and help. But then also be thankful that they're taking some of the pressure off of you. But using these tactics, it's going to build social proof through word of mouth marketing. People trust what they know. So if you use your clients and you use your families to talk to somebody that they know, they're going to feel more comfortable than if it's just you talking to them. If they've never met you, they're not going to believe what you say. They're going to be like, well, this person's going to tell me anything she wants me to know. But if Miss Smith's daughter really appreciates them and loves them, and this is what she said about it, it must be pretty legit. So use your social network. And again, not just social media. You've got a social network of people, and use that to your benefit. So offer online opportunities. Does your organization have an online volunteer opportunity? If they do, list it. A lot of high school kids are looking for ways to get volunteer hours for scholarships and different things. Let them manage your social media, or let them do graphic design, or take photos for a flyer, or do some kind of indirect work for your organization. Take some of the pressure off of you so you can focus more on recruiting for your Resource Divas. That's a Resource Diva. Use that high school kid as a Resource Diva. They're managing your social media. They're your Resource Diva. Some companies encourage their employees to volunteer during work hours. I've not found any, but it does happen. But take advantage of that. They may not be somebody that comes directly into your office and does it, but there are opportunities out there. And again, that takes some of the pressure off of your day-to-day to where you can focus more on recruiting. So this helps you with your time management, where you may think, I'm a one-person nonprofit. I don't have the money to recruit volunteers. Maybe you don't have the money to recruit volunteers in a big way, but you have the money, or you have the resources to get somebody to help you with your online social media, so you can stop worrying about that, so you can focus more on doing your actual volunteer recruiting. This is, again, all finding that right person. You've got to find what fits for your organizations. Volunteers can offer their skills of data entry, graphic design, fundraising, social media management, etc. There's different ways out there for everybody. So make sure that if you have that opportunity, include that in your product or in your volunteer description. You don't want to not have somebody volunteer just because that's maybe not what you're looking for at the moment. They might come in handy down the road. Leave seats empty. This is hard to hear, and it's hard to think about. To find the right fit, it's important to screen your potential volunteers. Ask questions. Make sure that you know you're getting the right person. Leaving seats empty, it's going to be hard and it's going to seem counterproductive. But if you're filling seats just to fill seats, it's more work than you want. So if you're getting volunteers just to say, I have 50 volunteers, what's the point? Again, quality over quantity. You don't want to have somebody volunteer just to say they're a volunteer. If they're not the right fit and they never do anything, honestly, what's the point? So sometimes a spot's better left empty than filled with the wrong person. So make sure you're asking questions of your potential volunteers, your potential Resource Divas, your potential waymakers. Nobody is better than just a warm body. So just to say you filled that seat is not better than to have somebody that's actually going to do something. So have some questions in your application. You don't want to bombard your volunteers with 20 questions, because then they're going to be like, well, this is not worth it. I'm not answering all these questions. But ask them some screening questions. Maybe you put it as part of your application. Maybe you do a little interview part when you sit down and talk to them. Maybe you put it in with your training. But how to weed them out and how to find where they might fit. Maybe they're more suited to manage your social media. Maybe they're more suited to look at something else, to do fundraising. Maybe they're more suited to drive, or whatever you're looking for. Maybe by asking these questions, you can find how you get where they are. Here's some examples of some questions that you might ask. Sydney, before I do this, I saw a question come up.
Yeah. How do you deny someone who consistently wants to volunteer, but you don't trust their motives?
That's a really good question. Maybe find something small for them to do, like stuff in envelopes or making copies, or do something small to start out, so then you can ask some of these questions we're going to go over while they're doing these small tasks, so you can get a better feeling of their motive. And once you fill out their motive, maybe it's like, okay, well, I don't have anything else right now, or figure out a way to keep them doing small tasks instead of giving them more responsibilities. I hope that helped. Again, I'm not an expert, so I don't know, but some of the questions, why do you want to volunteer with our organization? What makes you a good fit for this position? And some of these questions may help with that person that they may weed themselves out by answering these questions. What makes you feel appreciated? Again, these are just examples. You can obviously adapt to however. Do you prefer to work independently or collaboratively? If you need somebody, like with me, my waymakers, they're independent. If I can't trust them to do it independently and they prefer to work as a group, then obviously they're not the right fit for me. For to be a driver, maybe if they're collaborative, I can have them help organize an event if we're doing an event. So I'll be like, well, I can't use you right now as a driver, but I can keep your information, and when we get ready to plan our volunteer appreciation, I might give you a call because I'm going to need some more hands-on help with that. So you can always defer it that way. Do you consider yourself a leader? Maybe that's going to help you on if you do have some party animals that you're wanting to get together to plan a volunteer appreciation. And do you consider yourself a leader? A lot of times people are going to tell you yes, or if they don't want to be in charge of anything, they're going to say no. So then you're going to kind of know who to put in charge of your party animals. What causes are you passionate about? This just kind of gives you an idea on them. This might help with your motives. So what are they passionate about? If they're passionate about things that are completely opposite of what your program is about, then they're not the right fit for you. And maybe that's just what you tell them. You know what? I just don't think that we're the right fit. I'm sorry this doesn't work, but I need somebody that is X, Y, and Z, and I just don't feel like this is the right fit. I appreciate your effort. I appreciate you wanting to help, but right now I just don't feel like it's the right fit. And that's okay. Be honest with them, because you would much rather have the right fit than have somebody that's going to come in and make it a negative environment for everybody else involved. What interests you about the position? Why do they even want to consider this position anyways? Why do they want to be a resource diva? Why do they want to be a waymaker? Why do they want to be a party animal? Is it just to get hours for their internship? Is it because they're retired or they need something to do? Is it something they're really passionate about? Like, why do they even care? Why do they want to do it? And then ask them, what questions do you have for me? What can I answer for you? Do you have questions about what we do? Do you have questions about our services? Fill in there. Maybe they're thinking the same thing. Is this the right fit for me? So answer their questions also. What barriers to volunteering do you anticipate, and how can I help you? Be there for them. Make sure you're open and you're honest. If they have genuine concerns about their barriers to volunteering, how can you help them out? If they are the right fit, you don't want them to get discouraged. You want to interact with them, and you want to make sure that they know that you're there every step of the way. And then, are there any physical restrictions that they may have? And if so, how can we help? Again, if you're looking for somebody to go and set up at trade shows or marketing events, and this person can't lift 50 pounds, maybe you need to pair them with somebody who can. Maybe the person that can't lift, a bunch of weight or can't walk a long distance, they're great at speaking. So you know that they're the right fit for talking to people, but they just can't lift a lot of stuff. So you need to pair them up with somebody who may not be the best speaker, but they're good at moving things and lifting things. So you can pair them together, because together they're going to do a good job. So again, you've got to find the right fit. Again, like we started at the beginning, if somebody would just volunteer, that would be great. But we want to make sure we're having the right volunteers. So anybody have questions on that?
We did have one question come in. Do you have ADA, I believe that's Americans with Disability Act, descriptions for your positions?
For mine, I don't, because with my program, our people have to be able to drive, so we don't have any. But I can research some and I can try to find them. And definitely share that with Sydney to share. But yeah, I mean, I can definitely try to find you some of that. I don't have any off the top of my head. Question to ask, you know, is there any ADA requirements that you need that we don't offer, or how can we assist, or anything like that? But yeah, I can definitely do some research on that and figure some out for you. Let me make a note. Okay. So I've said this once, I've said it twice, I'm going to say it again. Focus on their benefits and not your needs. It's not about you. And again, that's hard to hear, but truth hurts sometimes. Together we can make a difference, but we just need them to know what it's going to do to benefit them. So you spent all this time identifying what makes your program great. Now you need to focus on how your program benefits your volunteer. Ask yourself, why do they need you? Why should they spend their time volunteering with your organization? Why would they want to recommend anybody to volunteer with you? Yes, we need help. And while that may be true, that cannot be the central focus. We have to make sure that they know how it's going to benefit them. If we seem too desperate, they're not going to want to help, because then they're going to be afraid we're going to latch on and we're never going to let go. And let's be honest, we've all done that, myself included. You find a volunteer that is amazing and you just latch onto them and you want to clone them. I've said it. I've got about 5 in my program right now. If I could clone, I would. And I've said it 100 times. And I don't need to do that, because they're going to get discouraged and they're going to be like, well, I'm going to quit doing this because she's taking advantage. Again, this has been eye-opening for me too. I need to focus on how it's benefiting them. And that may be asking them, what are the benefits you're getting out of this? When Sydney did that Motivational Monday, when she was focusing on the volunteers and having them fill out that information, that was great, because I was learning things about some of my volunteers. Why did they even do this? What have they gotten out of it? Things that I should have been asking on my own. But again, I got busy doing everything else and I just didn't have the time. Now I got to make time. It's time to focus on the volunteer. It's time to focus on my waymakers. They're making a way for these older adults. I need to make a way to make their job easier and to show them that I truly, truly appreciate what they do. So focus on their benefits and not your needs. Yes, we all need help, but we cannot be desperate as much as we want to be. We can be desperate in our office, just don't be desperate to them. The next important thing is communicate your expectations. This goes along with your product or your position description. Like employees, volunteers come with a passion for your cause and an interest in your work. Clearly communicate your expectations from the start. Be upfront and honest. This makes them more comfortable and it keeps them happy. Set your expectations at the beginning. Let them know up front what you expect, and if they are not going to comply, then they're not the right fit. If this is not going to work for them, you want to know right off from the beginning. Again, if it deters them from volunteering, that's okay. They're not the right fit. They're not what you need. And you would rather know at the beginning than invest all of your time in training and in doing all this other stuff for however long it takes you, for 2 or 3 weeks, just to find out that this is not really what I want to do. So know it up front. Why it may be disheartening, because again, we're all desperate and we all just want some volunteers. It's better to weed them out in the beginning than to put in all your time and effort and then have to come back later and do it. So now here's a big question. Now that you've done all this work and you've communicated your expectations, you've talked about your volunteers, you've shown them their benefits, now you have to, is it easy to volunteer? Not just in general. Is it easy to volunteer for your organization? Have you ever tried to sign up as a volunteer for your organization? You might think, I got everything in place. I just don't understand why people aren't doing it. It's just a simple click of the button on the website. I don't know why they're not doing it. Is it though? Are the steps clear? Are the people you encounter friendly? Are the people that answer the phone friendly? Does the phone get answered? Are emails being responded to? It may be worth a little extra training to make sure you're not giving a potential volunteer a bad first impression. It's like the old saying always goes, you only have one chance to make a good first impression. So take a minute, try to volunteer for your organization. If you have it set up online for them to click a button and do it and load the forms and they print them out, do it. Do it from your home computer. Not from your work computer. Try to do it there. See how it goes. See, is it easy? Does it load easily? Do the forms look pretty? Sometimes we use the same form so many times that after so many copies, they start looking ugly. That can leave a bad first impression. Well, they don't even care enough to clean up their forms. This is hard to read. This doesn't print out clear. It may be worth it just to take a day and just redo your forms. Forms a lot of times are set up in Word or Excel or something like that, so it's easy to just print out a fresh copy, rescan it as a PDF or whatever, and have it re-uploaded to your site, so you know it's fresh. Maybe you've had new forms. Maybe you have with COVID. We've implemented a COVID policy that now has to be signed. Maybe that needs to be added to your application process. Maybe there's some of these questions you want to change and add to your application. Go ahead and do that. Take a day. Try to figure out what makes your program look more presentable on the beginning. And always, always, always return calls and emails. Never underestimate the power of a form that won't load, a cold sounding receptionist, or an unreturned phone call. Even if it's quick, don't let it go. They may be waiting, they may have reached out to 3 or 4 different organizations, and they may be saying, okay, the first one that responds is who I'm going to go with. And you're going to miss your chance because you were too busy to take the time to reach out. They took the time to reach out to you. Take the time to follow through. Again, show them they're important. Show them their worth. If they know from the beginning that they're important to you, even if you've had a busy day, you've taken that time and that effort, then they're going to be more appreciative to work with you. Make it enjoyable. Fun is the secret ingredient. Nobody wants to do something that's not fun. Volunteers are going to stay engaged and recommend it to others if they enjoy what they do. So while we need to do all this paperwork, and I used air quotes, not like any of y'all saw me, but make it fun. Use things that we've talked about. Yeah, it's important, but if it's not fun, it's never going to work. Do things for them. Do little candygrams for them. Do something to show them that you appreciate them. Make sure that if you get stories from driver or from clients with me, our clients will come back and be like, you know, this driver was so great. He just went above and beyond, and I just don't know what I would do without him. We then turn around and let that driver know that, hey, this is what they've said. You know, make sure they know how much they're being appreciated by their clients. Make sure they understand that. Don't tell them the bad, but tell them the good. Make sure it's fun. Make sure you make it fun. Do little fun things, and it doesn't have to be expensive. You can do things on, you know, print off stuff, print off little cards, or just send them little cards, send them little notes. email them little notes, text them little notes, do little things, little memes. If you find little memes, appropriate memes, that's free. Email it to them. Get on Pinterest and try to find little things. Some stuff you can get at the dollar store. It's not expensive. You can get them in bulk and make your the cards that they show on Pinterest. You can do that yourself. You can do it in Word, and it doesn't have to be fancy. It can just be something simple and sweet, and get a pack of juicy fruit and be like, or not juicy fruit, sweet tarts, you're the sweet to the tart part of my day, or something like that, and just give it to them when you see them. It just something simple like that can easily be done. That's not super expensive. It doesn't have to be major, just something fun. We want them to have fun, and we want them to keep coming back. And when they know they're appreciated, they know that they'll do more. Again, this all goes hand in hand. Provide feedback and recognition. They want to be treated like equals and not outsiders. They want to be treated like the staff. Just like you give your employees, if you have employees or if you work within an organization that has employees, they get feedback and recognition. Do the same for your volunteers. I know COVID made volunteer appreciation a lot difficult this year. Most of us didn't get to do it. But make sure you try to do something. Either if you do certificates for them, you can download free templates for certificates in Word, and then go in and type their name, print them out in color, mail it to them, that you appreciate them. Do something to show them that you recognize them, you recognize what they do, and you appreciate them. Manage them with the respect and empower them to have a rewarding experience. Again, we want to empower them. But also you want to give them the feedback that's negative. But sandwich it with the positive. So tell them something good, say, hey, this might be something you need to work on, and then tell them something good again. So sandwich it with the positive or the negative between two positives. So you don't want to just come in and be like, you're doing this and this is awful and da da da. But if they have done something that doesn't fall within the rules, definitely you want them to know it, but also you want them to know everything they've done right. Any questions or anything on that one?
No questions came in, but similar to an example that you gave earlier with, I believe it was at a local gas station or oil change place, an idea came in to ask for coupons for free coffee or sandwiches from fast food or local restaurant owners.
Yes, that's great. That's a perfect idea. Go to your, again, it's easier if they're locally owned, again, because they're invested in your community. They see what you're doing for the community. You can always provide them, if they give you a dollar value, give them a letter on letterhead to say they donated this to your organization, that they can use it as a tax write-off. Companies love a tax write-off. Let them know that you can provide them with that if they, give you some kind of coupon. Maybe it's a free coffee, or maybe if it's a buy one, get one. Maybe if they buy their first coffee, the next coffee they get is free. Maybe it's something like that, or partner with them. Something to recognize for your employees. Again, with your volunteers. Again, hours they drive. I can't go out and buy them gas because I'm on a grant, and that's a no-no. I can't go buy them gas cards. I can't get them oil changes. So we just partnered with that local oil change. And I think it's 15% off of an oil change. And then they can either do that, or they can get a $50 off of a complete set of tires. And, $50 doesn't sound like a whole lot, but when you're buying a whole set of tires, that's a lot. And that company is getting business because we're sending people to them, be like, hey, because you're a volunteer with us, you can get this. And then people are likely to go back because they're a good company. I mean, they treat their people right, and they're locally owned. And so it's so partner up with people, do things like that to benefit your volunteers. And you want to create a call to action. It invites your volunteers to register with your organization, volunteer for a specific role, or attend your next event. You can do this with your emails, through social media, through your website, public service announcements, newsletters, mail outs, local radio, whatever you use. But your call to action, the biggest thing is don't forget to follow up with it. Make sure you include your link if you have it to where you can do your website. Make sure you can go there and do it. try to, if it's on your Facebook page and people send messages, make sure you follow up and don't wait a long time. Because again, never underestimate the power of an unanswered call or action. Some examples of call to action, they can include help us do more for our community, volunteer today. So again, you're showing them that they're going to volunteer for their community. We hear you're pretty amazing. Why not volunteer? Register here. Or some of others, Nike, just do it. They left the it up to the consumer. Just do it. Was that run that marathon? Was that build a house? Was that, take that extra walk today? What was their it? Discover your best life. Join our community. Book your next adventure. Vote now. Whatever that might be. Anything that invokes action out of your community. Some of the examples that I've used with our My Ride program is give the gift of a lift. So that was the, give the gift of a lift. This is your call to action. Make that gift important. Make a difference today. Change somebody's life. And then another one we did was be a missionary in your own backyard. We sent this one, we targeted churches. This was a targeted marketing campaign. We targeted churches. So be a missionary in your own backyard. So these are some of the things that I've used for my campaign, just to show you examples, but make sure you create a call to action. Ask them to do something, put something out there for them to do. And then revisit your volunteer mission and strategy often. You put all this work into recruiting, volunteer recruiting, and your strategy and your missions. Don't just let it go to waste. Use it, adapt it, rework it. It's going to change. As your program changes, as your needs change, you're going to have to change it. So it's going to be an ongoing process. It's not going to be okay, I've done it, I'm good. Now, where's all my volunteers? You're going to have to rework it. Your organization, again, your needs are going to change, your strategy is going to change. It isn't a one-size-fits-all situation. And what works for me with volunteer driving is not going to work with somebody that does food. It's not. It's going to be completely different. You've got to. It's different for everybody. So again, just use this. Revise it, rethink it, redefine it. Whatever works for you. These are just some ideas. Does anybody have any questions? There's my contact information. This presentation Sydney is going to get. And she's going to send out to you all along with some examples, and those I've got survey questions. I'm going to send out some examples of those, and then also that little quiz that you can ask the staff and things on how they perceive volunteers, so you can kind of get an idea of where you're at right now with your perceived volunteer values. So questions from anybody? Helpful, not helpful?
We haven't had any questions come in. I think this has definitely been a great presentation, and there's more ideas of places to look at for, free ice cream and other kind of coupons in the chat box. If anyone's interested, they can look at those. But I don't see any other questions that have come in. Very helpful information is a lot of the feedback that you're getting. Wonderful. Yep, you could probably see all the praise that you're receiving. So as we wrap up, and there's Kita's contact information, please feel free to reach out to her. Like she mentioned, she's going to send me all of her resources, and I will get all of that to you all this afternoon or tomorrow morning at the latest. I'm going to stop the recording here in a minute, but I just wanted to remind everyone that our next webinar, oh gosh, I forgot the date of it already, will be March 18th, same time, same place. And I don't have my flyer open on what exactly it's going to be talking about. I believe it's the 3 R's of volunteer engagement with Alex Ropes from Washington State. So I hope you all can join us for that presentation. And we thank you all so much for attending. Thank you, Kita. Absolutely amazing information. Great examples. We really appreciate your time.
No problem. Thanks for asking me to do it.
You came highly recommended. But I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, and then we can see if there's any other questions. So thank you all so much again.